Excellent. Good morning. Well, good morning, everyone. We are here to talk about the USDA Value Added Producer Grant. This is by far my most favorite grant that is available to farmers. It is the closest thing to free money that's out there directly going into the hands of farmers. So today, just to give you the agenda, I'm going to tell you who I am, and then I'm going to pass it on to Carlotta Donisi from USDA, and she's going to tell us all about the program. We'll then have a farmer panel, and then I will, in the last hour, go through tips and tricks on how to prepare and create a really good application. So in terms of who I am, my name's Melissa Moeller. I started and operated Misty Meadows Farm, did pasture-raised organic eggs for 16 years. And during that time, I discovered the Value Added Producer Grant Program through NABC. In that time, I had 3 back-to-back VAPG grants. My first one was for taking retired laying hens and turning them into soup stock, which I then sold in grocery stores. And that was so successful, and I really appreciated the money coming in from that. So then when that one was finished, I did a compost, bagged compost. So I took chicken manure and turned it into chicken compost and sold that. My husband said at that time I'd really made it because I was able to sell poop to people and get them to pay money. And when that one was done, I really had the program. I understood it a little bit better of how I should have applied to begin with, and I applied to sell more eggs to more people and more places. And at the conclusion of that grant, I realized what I really wanted to be doing was helping other farmers apply for grants, such as the Value Added Producer Grant. I went and got an MBA and then started working with NABC, helping farmers access capital and grow their businesses. So that's who I am. We are incredibly blessed today to be able to have Carlotta Donisi here from USDA Rural Development. Rural Development is the department that puts on the Value Added Producer Grant, who scores it, and who administrates it. So Carlotta, I'm so glad you're here and looking forward to what you're going to tell everyone about the Value Added Producer Grant.
Well, good morning. Thank you for sponsoring this workshop. It's really important for people to sort of hear about it and at least get a feel for it. Grants are not always easy to apply for, and this one is known to be in depth. So it's not like a one-page thing, but we're going to try to help you through that and show through our help, as well as NABC and grant writer, if you like, and by hearing from past existing grantees today that will highlight this can be done, maybe not easily, but it can very well be done to help you get your get to the next level with your value added products, realize more revenue for yourself, and just grow your business. And we're going to go through the slides, and they're kind of dry, but you'll see as it comes together with the speakers, as well as Melissa wrapping it up at the end with some really good points as far as the grant writing goes. You know, then some of the dry slides that I'm presenting will sort of make sense, and when you look back at them, should be helpful. I hope that's the case. I also have my coworker, Jeff Peterson. Now, we've both been with USDA Rural Development for many, many years, and Jeff used to be with Farm Service Agency. So he has a vast history with farmers, and I've got many years with the value added, as well as many of our other rural development programs. And just real quickly, I'll mention that we do have our Renewable Energy for America program that can help farmers and small businesses to do energy efficiency improvements or renewable energy projects, such as we see a lot of solar, and that is a separate program under REAP. I just wanted to have that chance to mention that because a lot of times our clients are using both, and it makes sense when you can do that. And at this point, that's a 50% matching program also. So I'll move on from that and go ahead and jump into the value-added producer grant presentation. So as I said, the grant is meant for and for the purpose of helping ag producers successfully process, market, and sell value-added products. It's a way to help you expand your markets, and you know, in a holistic, all the way around view, it strengthens rural economies. So, you know, if farmers are doing well in areas, you know, you're helping to support other small businesses in the area. So that's what that means. Some of the funds can be used for two separate uses. If you were going to go into it wanting to do a feasibility study, maybe get a solid business and marketing plan in place. If, let's say, you're already growing your main product, but you just need that feasibility study, you can do that under a planning grant for up to a $75,000 grant. If you're already, you know, kind of ready to do your value-added product, you maybe already have done a feasibility study, and we'll get into more details, but maybe you're already doing the value-added product for some time. You may want to go straight to a working capital grant, which can be a maximum of $250,000. So, you know, first, right off the bat, that's a pretty big grant. And even if you match it with your own matching funds, which we will talk about, this is a good way to use funds that you normally can't borrow money for, working capital type expenses. This is all post-harvest, so not production, but post-production, post-harvest, and not for infrastructure and construction, but all of these things that are operational expenses, and marketing, processing, and we'll have more details on that. And again, this is a matching grant, so that it is 50-50. So every dollar that you pay, either from your matching funds or cash, we match it with grant funds. Go ahead. We'll talk about applicant eligibility. So an ag producer definition, which you would have to meet, is an individual or an entity directly engaged in the production of an ag commodity and has that legal right to harvest as an ag commodity that is subject to what will be your value-added project and product. Ag producers may directly engage either through substantially participating in the labor, management, and field operations themselves, or by maintaining ownership and financial control of the ag operation. Okay, so there are 4 types of applicants: ag producers, ag producer groups, farmer and rancher co-ops, and majority controlled producer-based businesses. Will elaborate a bit. By and far, applicants are usually just applying as an ag producer. Ag producer is a for-profit ag business, so not nonprofits, is not the case for this, and that you produce your ag commodity through your own participation in labor management and field operations, or you're an entity that's 100% owned by individuals, entity or family farm that produces an ag commodity through labor management and field operations. And this category also includes harvesters like fishers, and I'm not sure what that word timer.
It was supposed to be timber. Sorry about that.
Okay, timber harvesters. I should have guessed that. So harvesting is a whole nother thing, and I have definitely worked on these types, but you know, we do less of them, but definitely it's available. And so again, a majority of our applications are those that are the ag producers. An ag producer group can be a nonprofit organization that represents or works on behalf of ag producers. So there's some examples in those icons. Washington Potatoes is one, Washington Council, Dairy, and then it has a few caveats. Majority of the membership must meet an ag producer, and the majority of the board must meet ag producers. Farmer rancher co-ops. We have some localized examples here in these icons, which have all received value added in our state. And these are business owned or controlled by ag producers, organized as a co-op, usually in our state, and harvester co-ops are not eligible, however. Okay, we can go on. Majority controlled producer-based business venture. So I can't even think of an example in our state where we've used this, but it does involve that the majority of control and financial ownership are ag producers, still owned by multiple entities, some of which might not be ag producers. They just have to be majority. It might be an option for situations where ag commodity is transferred to a different affiliated business for processing, which is the only case in our value added that this could happen. And this one's a little bit trickier to qualify. So it definitely requires some eligibility confirmation directly with us at Rural Development. And there is a set aside of funding for this particular type of applicant. So applicant eligibility continued. All applicants must currently produce and provide more than 50% of the raw commodity that will be used for the value-added product. That said, a lot of people think that all the ingredients that go into their product must be their product. That's not the case. You just have to have one ingredient that you are growing and provide more than 50% of it to your value added product / project. You have to own the product from its raw commodity state through the production of the value added product during the project. So you can't lose control of that, of owning it by sending it to a co-packer. Not to say you can't use a co-packer, but you do have to retain that ownership throughout. And I did mention about the multiple products. So just a simple example, let's say you were doing pesto and you were growing the basil for that. You wouldn't have to also be growing the garlic and the whatever else, the olive oil and things like that. Those other things you can purchase. You just have to have that main ingredient that that you provide over 50% of. Okay. The product eligibility. So this word starts getting a little bit trickier. And it gets trickier as we go, but we can get through it. So product requirements. So you have to show the value added to your commodity in one of 5 methods or methodologies. You have to show increase in customer base, and you have to show an increase in your revenue attributed to that value added product. And you will be doing that in your grant application. And then again, you'll be, reporting on it as you go through the project. And at the end, you'll be evaluating how you met all of that. Next. The methods or the methodologies to add value. One of these your project will be based on. You may be utilizing some or all of these, but we really want to settle on what you feel is the main method that you're going to use to add value to your product. So the first one that we see a lot of is a change in physical state of your product. So, simple example of turning apples into applesauce. And of course, we have much more complicated and fun projects, but that's a simple example. Locally produced, marketed, and distributed. So let's say you're growing, I don't know, multiple vegetables on your farm, but you're only and you're growing them on your farm, and you're only marketing and distributing them, selling them within the local area. Now, the local area for our purposes is within the state or within 400 miles. So even if you were selling to Idaho or Oregon, you're probably still going to be local because of that 400-mile thing, or anywhere in the state. So just by virtue of labeling and selling it as a locally produced and marketed product, that is one of the methods that you could zero in on. And we see a lot of applications of this nature. The next three we see less of, but we still see enhanced production methods. So that would be, give an example, Melissa.
Organic.
Thank you. Yeah, so you're enhancing the value of your product because you're growing it in an organic method. So and then product segregation, an example of that is one that comes to mind is where on a farm, not so much that I see here on the west side, but where you're doing GMO corn, let's say, and non-GMO. So you're completely segregating your value-added product that you're going to be selling. And then the fifth is renewable energy. And this is really only for bio products, like if you're, making a bio, like an oil that's going to be used for renewable energy. So it's not for solar or some of the standard ones that you really should be looking at. Our REAP program that I mentioned in the beginning. So again, or repeat, you'll probably hear it again, but when you're doing the application and filling it out, you're really going to be presenting all of your information using one methodology. So, stick to that, because you do not get more points or anything. Of course, like, you could always mention some of the other things that you might be hitting, but basically you're going to be, clicking the button or the box for one. Go ahead. I think I kind of gave examples along the way, but we'll kind of whip through these. So the first method was changing the physical state of your product. And so that is when you're changing, it's irreversible. And again, back to the applesauce. Once you cook and puree or what to your apples and turn it into applesauce or some other product, you can't reverse that back to its original apple state. And that's just a simple example. And then what is not eligible is if you're just preserving that product post-harvest, like cold storing it or freezing it. So the physical state, again, more examples would be meat into cheese, even wool from, let's say, your sheep or some other animal, and wool being turned into a fiber that's used for clothing or whatever purpose that adds value to that wool. And livestock into packaged meat or other meat products. Those are some examples. We have a lot of really interesting examples. So you'll hear some from our speakers in a bit. Pictures. These are these are local examples. Simple Goodness was a real fun one because they make an apple pie syrup. This one doesn't contain any alcohol. This one, you use to base your apple pie drink and add what you want. And so they have been successful in Pierce County on a pretty small farm, and they used, some of their product to make this and other syrups that were served under 2 value-added producer grants. And then some of the other examples you see. Go ahead. Locally produced. Again, it's your food that's marketed and distributed within 400 miles or within the state. You still do have to show increase in revenues. So, when you're talking through your application and doing your write-up and all that, there's going to be places where you do have to discuss why locally produced food brings in more than if you just sold it as non-local. And at least we in Washington State do already know this is true and this is the case. So examples, well, I kind of already discussed that. So people are willing to pay from their local farms in the area, and I am. So that's one person. Go ahead. Enhanced production, and we spoke briefly on that. Here's some other examples. Free range, so free range chickens, pasture raised meat and eggs, or grass fed. So these would fall under the enhanced production if you were deriving, increased value for these methods. And again, people do prove they're willing to pay for these enhanced production methods. Go ahead. Segregation, I kind of gave that example. We don't see this type of example that often here, but it is open. Go ahead. And then again, to renewable energy. For the most part, we have a REAP program that covers this. For mostly, we're doing solar, geothermal, and things like that, digesters even. But the value added can be used for this, but the value added is a much more complicated grant to apply for renewable energy. So look at REAP. And just a recap of the 5 methodologies that one of which you would point out when you make your application. Another little recap just to show, your main goal is that you are increasing your customer base as a result of the value-added project, and that you are showing that you will realize a greater revenue because of your value-added product / project. Application types. Planning grants, which that's in and of itself. So that's if you wanted to start out and you wanted to get a good solid feasibility study done by a third party, and you want to have a really detailed, good working business plan and marketing plan, let's say any of those kind of things, you could use that $75,000 up to $75,000 planning grant. Okay. And so these are not mixed together. So the second type is the working capital, and it can be made up of, and it does get a little bit complicated in these next 3 types of applications. But the key is when you get close to keying in on what type of application you're going for, you're going to be either speaking to me, or maybe you're selecting to go speak with Melissa or Jeff Peterson. Let's not forget him. So there and others at rural development can speak to you, and we're always available. So that's one of our things, is that we are available. You're not dropped the minute that this presentation is done. We will help you through thinking it through. Go ahead. Okay, I kind of already talked about that. And it definitely would be for a qualified third-party consultant for that development. So you wouldn't be doing your own personal feasibility study and paying yourself. In fact, none of the grant funds can pay you or your family, and we'll remark on that again on the other types too. Go ahead. Okay, so switching to the working capital type applications. Typically these are grants that you are asking for less than 50,000, where you're looking at a whole project would be 100,000, but the grant portion would be, of course, half of that, 50,000. And all of the applicant types are eligible under simplified, and this would mean that no feasibility study is required. We would highly recommend that there is a business plan and or a marketing plan, even on a simplified, just for your own purposes and really for explaining yourself when you're filling out the grant application. And the business plan and marketing plan can be self-prepared in this case. And you must always show your customer expansion and revenue increase. And again, on all of the applications, you have to do that. An emerging market application can be anywhere between 50,000 and 250,000. This is when you've been producing the product for less than 2 years, but you have been producing it. So it's that you're showing that that experience and that history. All applicant types are eligible for emerging markets. Independent third-party produced feasibility study and business plan are required for this type of application. Grant requests between 50 and 250,000. Is this a repeat?
Oh,
So
this
you
is
have
the
to be
market
produced.
expansion. Look, yeah, the top
Okay.
is expansion grant.
Oh, right. The other was emerging. So sorry. Yes. So again, the market expansion, this would be if you have to be producing and marketing your value-added project for at least the last 2 years for this market expansion type. Ag producers are the only eligible applicant type that can qualify for this. Business or marketing plan is required, but not a feasibility study in this case. And again, a business or marketing plan can be developed by the applicant.
And Carlotta, this is Jeff. Do we generally, and I'll let Melissa ring in here too, do we generally try and utilize a marketing plan if possible on that? A business plan is a little more in depth as to what the reg requires, and so that might be something as you look at that, because a marketing plan can often suffice for that.
Correct. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. Little recap. Planning grants, working capital, and then just a little bit about equipment. We're going to talk a little bit more about equipment. But what the working capital cannot cover is your production expenses. So, just think post-harvest expenses. And some equipment, as we label it under supplies, may be included in applications under working capital. And those would be equipment that is less than 10,000 in value. And that's been upped from the previous 5,000 very recently. So we are operating under a new regulation that's not yet published. So we'll be doing some fine tuning. So we'll just make that remark for now. Okay. So eligible expenses, processing costs for labor, utilities, it may be the utilities might be broken down for how much you're, using just for your value added project. It wouldn't allow for paying for utilities for your whole farm operation and different things like that. But there's a way of breaking down and taking advantage of that. If you have to buy other ingredients for your project, packaging, labels, supplies, these are all eligible. Again, I mentioned you may have to purchase other raw commodity, but it does have to be less than the 50% of the total that you need for your whole project. You can pay for advertising, promotional activities. Again, overhead, you have to pay a bookkeeper, office supplies, can help with your website. It can't help with starting it up completely, getting a website, but it can help with fine tuning it and updating it and that kind of thing. Label designing, and a lot of those expenses can be allowed. And then distribution costs, shipping, delivery. I'm sure there's other examples, but all of those would be allowable. Food safety. So this is a new part of the regulation that has been provided. So it is new to us. And actually, I think I'm just going to let Melissa do this slide because
Sure.
we talked at length, and I think she has a good way of explaining it.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Carlotta. So this is a brand new piece of the value-added grant. In the past, it's always been no equipment, no equipment. You can't have equipment. Well, they've added a section where you can have post-harvest food safety equipment. So not food safety out in the field, but once you're processing it, you can include equipment worth up to $13,000. You have to pay for half of that yourself with cash, but they would pay for that. In addition, they're encouraging applicants to add food safety to their applications. We've never really emphasized those before, but certifications, inspections, all your supplies related to food safety. So PPE supplies that are relevant to the processing, marketing, and distribution. Also could be training for employees in food safety for the processing part. Again, we've always got to separate anything that happens in the field and everything that happens after harvest. So if you're planning to apply this year and next year, be thinking about expenses that are related to food safety for processing and get those into your application. Now, they actually have 10% of the money is being set aside for projects that are majority related to food safety. It's going to be challenging to create an application that gets that many dollars just into post-harvest food safety. But if you have a great idea about that, I would absolutely love to hear about it and work with you on it. Back to you, Carlotta.
Thanks. So there may be some sort of little kinks or bugs to work out with that particular piece. And then, of course, and I think that's important, is talking through your project with somebody here at Rural Development or with NABC with Melissa. Okay, go ahead. Ineligible expenses under value added. This program is not for construction of buildings or any kind of construction. It's really not for what the federal regulation calls equipment and vehicles. Again, back to some equipment that is listed under supplies that's under 10,000, and some of if it falls under food safety, maybe, but for the most part, it's not for buying, for infrastructure type equipment to outfit your farm and get it going. It's not for that. So no costs that have to do with producing, growing, actually doing the harvesting are eligible for any of the expenses. Engineering, architectural design kind of goes along with the construction, not eligible. A conflict of interest, which we do have a slide that specifically has the language for that. We have to be careful of that. I'm just going to go ahead and read this whole sentence. Real or apparent conflict of interest for owners, employees, officers, agents, or their immediate family members having a personal, professional, financial, or other interest in the outcome of the project, including organizational conflicts and conflicts that restrict open and free competition for unrestrained trade. So, you know, buying a product from another company that you own or are part ownership of is definitely a conflict of interest. Or, you know, just buying your less than 50% product from somebody that fits into here, you know, your son or your father or whatever. So just keep that conflict of interest in mind. And if something's tickling at the back of your mind that it might be, it just might be. So you want to run it by one of us just to make sure. Okay. We talked about the grant project being 50-50, 50% grant funds and 50% matching. So matching funds do have to add up to 50%, and that can be done in a number of ways. And so everything that you spend either your matching funds on or the grant funds on all have to be eligible value added cost, like what I talked about in the previous slides. And be, you know, free of conflict of interest and be verified at the time of award. This sentence, it says spent in advance of grant draw requests. We'll talk about that a little bit in reimbursements, but all that means is that when you present all of your invoices and your records of hours of labor and different things like that, the whole slew of things really for reimbursement, that you're showing that you are presenting to the project your matching funds at the same rate or ahead of the grant funds that you're going to ask back. Kind of complicated, but we'll talk about it a little bit more. Go ahead. So eligible matching funds is applicants' cash. Sometimes we see lines of credit or some other type of loan, not a lot. And in, you know, all the applications are scored for their merit based on a lot of contributing factors. And we'll talk about that a bit later too. So if you have cash in the project, you do receive, I'm not sure because they changed the scoring, but you're going to receive at least a couple points more for having some cash in the project. The big one is your value of your raw commodity can be included as match. And in fact, you can base your whole 50% matching funds on the value of your raw commodity. And of course, you are basing that on evidence of what that raw commodity is worth and all that kind of thing. You can also use applicant or family member in-kind labor. So this is just for matching funds, and it isn't, you know, you can't get paid for your or family member labor, but you can count the work that is demonstrated and documented as a value in your grant application. And of course, you are evidencing that value in ways also. And then we don't see this a lot, but third-party cash or third-party in-kind contributions. So sometimes there's other organizations, which I've seen actually a number of times, other organizations that may contribute their time to for your matching funds to help you be successful. So that is, don't rule that out. I've seen that a few times. Okay. Applicant in-kind, labor. So if it's your work or your family members' work that you're going to count as a value for your matching funds, it is limited to 25% of the total project cost. So you can't say, I'm going to do all the labor here and it's worth half of this whole project. No, you can only contribute 25% of the total project cost. So let's say 500,000 project that you're going to do over the course of 3 years, your in-kind labor could only be 125,000. And then you have to make up the difference with the other matching funds. If you're using that, it's not required either. So, you can get to your 50% in all of these ways that's listed here on this slide. Go ahead. Including cash, all cash, which honestly, I will say, if it's an all cash match, that is the easiest way for doing reimbursements later. But, so I will throw that in, even though it's not required. Okay. Application contents. Okay, so this will be our first year in 2025 that applications are going to be required to be completed through a grant application portal. So although I think it's really exciting, and I think that the portal has a lot of really cool things like self-assessment, and a lot of things based on the old way of applying through the quite lengthy application templates, which anybody that's on here that has looked at that or applied before will know. I think that the portal will actually be simpler, but some of the things that you have to do to be able to get into the portal are going to be new, and things that we're all going to have to learn together also. But Melissa has been working on that end of it, so she's going to talk more on that. But as far as application in general contents, there's 5 things that make up your application and that are going to be, reviewed and detailed with detailed information that you provide to us. The work plan and the budget is going to make up a narrative of what your project is, your goals, and all the tasks. So it's broken down quite detailed. Who is going to be doing what and when, and what during what period of the grant period. The budget cost, I believe that the portal, as the same as our templates have been, is going to provide for you like some tables that you'll be able to split up your categories of, what the budget is made up of, like labor for one, and then you'll be able to list the tasks, and then you're going to be able to identify the personnel that responsible for those, and the time frames, and then the source, whether it's going to be cash or other matching funds, or whether that's going to be paid out of grant funds. So it's kind of thing that you're going to understand a little bit better when you see that. Let's go. The grant period can be anywhere from 12 to 36 months. It's really scaled on the size of your project. If you were going to go for the total $250,000 grant, I think it's a really good idea. And in fact, really you should go for a 3-year period. Sometimes like the planning type only, you could get away with the 12 months because you want that feasibility study done or whatever within 12 months. But if you go for 36 months, there's no additional time you can get after that. If you go for 2 years, you'd have to go through a formal request to extend it. So, consider that. application does have to be complete, and it will be, hopefully, I am thinking that the new portal way will be a easier way to show that your application is complete. You can only have one active value-added producer grant at one time. So let's say you have one right now. You can't apply for another one and do them, simultaneously. If you're going to finish your present value-added before the time that we would be awarding, like August, September, then that would be okay, as long as the timing is, you got enough room to actually complete that other one. Going for multiple grants, which that would mean, let's say you got one, like Melissa mentioned, she had done 3, and we have, in fact, one of our speakers is on her 3rd grant. You'll hear from her. But multiple grants are allowed. So let's say you could start out with a planning grant or even a working capital, and in the next cycle of value added, as long as your value added product is substantially different in terms of the product and or the markets that you're going to be marketing and selling through, and not just extensions of your previous project, then you're free to apply again and again, as long as you meet this. Go ahead. Here's a sort of a snapshot of the project timeline. So you're assembling your application, you're getting all your information together. You're going to be submitting that through rural development through the portal. I think the portal will allow you to save and come and go as you're working on it. Do you feel that way, Melissa?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to happen.
It's gonna, yeah, I would think so. But I don't know, it's new to me too. So, and then, rural development's going to review and confirm that completion through the portal also. Then after, you're done and you've hit the deadline, is done and over with, then our agency, has a process where we're going to review the whole thing too, to ensure that you really are a complete application. And then it goes through the scoring competition, and your application is scored and competed against all applications in the nation, so not just in our state. So you want to put your best application forward and have all your information, ready to roll when you're getting that in there. And then when it comes to, then you're just in a waiting game until all of those steps take place with our agency. And then we would be notifying you sometime by September. I would be hopeful it would be before September, but in September. And then we prepare and let everybody know whether they have, met a high enough scoring and how you competed and if you're going to get funded. And then we do the paperwork for that and go through that process. And then we obligate the forms in our computer system, which puts all the funds in your name, for your project moving forward. And then, of course, you would begin conducting your project based on all of your work plan and all of that stuff. You're keeping track of everything. You're matching funds. And then you're going through the reimbursement process and reporting process. And again, it's a lot, but, our agency is very, very helpful, hands-on, and we're very responsive. So when you're trying to get through your first hopefully one or two or 3, first 3, reimbursements and reporting, we're going to help you, hold your hand and show you, what you need to do, because it can be a little bit tricky, but once you catch on, you'll be fine. Everybody, Well, almost everybody makes it through that with our help, and or you may be working with Melissa for that help too, and she'll be talking about that. Let's go on. I'm not 100% sure how the scoring is going to be. I think it's going to be pretty close to what it's been in the past, which is up here on the screen. So the all of this is written into your application. So if you're, entering it into your portal, or what we used to do in what we call the template, you're addressing the nature of your project. It's worth the most points, 30 points. So you're going to be talking about how your whole project has technical feasibility, operational efficiency, profitability, and sustainability. That's a lot of write-up. And, we'll have specific information that we're looking for. And I think Melissa's going to talk a little bit more detail on this too in her end of it. And then you're going to be discussing what the qualifications are of your team that's going to be working on your value-added project. So the personnel or team, you may be contracting out for some things like bookkeeping or grant management, or you're contracting out really for any piece of your eligible project, and also the qualifications of yourself and any of your employees. Those have to be specifically laid out, and the more specific you are, the better your points are. So as you heard me say, you're competing really with all the applications in the whole nation. So this scoring piece is very important, and being specific is just very important. And then the work plan and budget, which I kind of talked about in a previous slide, again, 20 points. So that detail on who's doing what and when, and how it's being covered, and some of the actual detail of how it's being carried out is very important. 20 points there. Matching funds and commitment, I believe is going to be worth up to 5 points. And you're going to be showing and explaining and evidencing how you have either cash on hand or the other matching funds way, in kind, labor, or the value of your commodity, that kind of thing. And then this is a new category, value added. If you've had a previous grant, you are going to be knocked by only getting 0 points. If you have not received a previous value added, you will just get 5 points. And then priority points will be based on your situation. So if you're applying for beginning farmer, rancher, or you're a socially disadvantaged group applicant, or a veteran, or a small to medium sized family farm, as our regulation, states, I think there's income revenue based is what that is, I think. If you're a cooperative or a producer group, these can be priority points that you would apply for. And, the template's going to have buttons to click on for that, and so, information. Go ahead.
So yeah, we have time set aside for questions for Carlotta. We can maybe we'll just take 5 minutes to ask any pressing questions before we bring out our farmer panel. There will be another opportunity to ask questions later. So just kind of looking through the questions that have been asked. Let me see. I'm not sure if Emily, you can help me with that.
The first few questions, my laptop for some reason booted me off, and then I lost the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I've got it. Yeah. So the first question was from Katie Hopper. If you contract grow with a farmer and receive basil in the raw state, is that considered ownership? And I think that might need a little more question on there of Is Katie still around?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So you're growing the basil for another farmer and then selling them the basil, is that correct?
A farmer is growing the basil for me.
Okay.
In
Are
fact, I'm contract growing a bunch of specialty crops with specific local farmers in Walla Walla. I have the processing facility.
Okay, so you are not the farmer then?
I
You're
am
the
not the farmer.
Yeah, you're not eligible. They would,
Okay.
they could apply if they are producing their own product and selling it, marketing and selling it, or if they're using you as a co-packer. But if your business is just processing and not growing, this is not the grant for you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Vala Ross, could equipment and pre-harvest be considered contribution toward the one-on-one match? Nope, your contributions have to be post-harvest marketing types of activities, marketing administration. Did you have any further questions on that, Vala?
Nope, that was actually answered after I wrote the question.
Okay. And Carlotta, yeah, just chime in if I'm taking over the question answer. I've been like sitting here quietly waiting.
I think, Melissa, the only thing I kind of add to that is when we have kind of those expense categories that could be attributed, like bookkeeping. Your farm may have bookkeeping services provided for harvest activities or growing activities, but you also, that same bookkeeper maybe handling the people that are working at the farmers market or doing packaging activities. In that case, we can still allow for bookkeeping, but we want to make sure that the expenses that you're estimating in your application are attributed directly to and related to the value added product.
That gets a little tricky, but yeah.
It does. Melissa will help you out with that. And we can too.
Mark Wright asks, what about rental of a commercial kitchen? Is that expense allowed? Absolutely. That is something that I think Jeff and Carlotta could say is definitely an allowed expense. Would honey extraction equipment be considered for food safety? I'd love to hear Jeff and Carlotta on this, but my initial thought is extraction is harvesting, so that is not an eligible expense. But maybe, well, Vala, maybe you could tell us more about that, about what does this equipment do? Is it about just the harvesting, or does it have something to do with after the honey is out of the comb?
There's a couple, I have a couple of ideas for that. One of them being that yes, the honey product itself, but it's actually the byproduct of beeswax that is the value add ingredient for me.
So the honey extraction equipment, is that extracting the honey out of the hive, or is it doing something after the honey's out of the hive?
Well, the beekeeper extracts it out of the hive by taking the frames out of the hive. I imagine that's the harvesting project, the harvesting part. But then to get it from its wax frame into a food safe jar, now I think that it's talking about food safety equipment, would be my inquiry.
I don't know. We may have to explore that a little bit. I'm trying to think about it. Is that the equivalent of a combine out in the, taking the wheat out of the, off the shaft of the wheat plant, or is it, kind of taking it where it's irreversible after that?
You can't put the honey back in the frame. It would become irreversible change of state.
Yeah, but is the extraction process doing that or not? It may be. You may be onto something there. We may have to. I'm just thinking kind of off the cuff here that we might try and see if we have some precedent there, just to see where that one would fit.
Yeah, I think that's
I'm
a good
not entirely sure.
a conversation directly with rural development there. Very interesting idea.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, please pursue it with us.
Yeah. Lindsay asked, does in-kind labor for matching funds need to have pay stub as proof? And I'd love to hear Jeff or Carlotta answer that one.
Usually we do see that. It is the cleanest way to do that. Sometimes though, people aren't actually paying themselves in that, you know, in that formal manner.
This is
And
Lindsay. Yeah, I
yeah,
was just wondering because I don't pay myself like an hourly wage. I pay myself at the end of the year. And so wondering like, can I account for my hours even though I'm not being paid hourly?
What I
yeah,
like to do is take the Department of Labor hourly rate for what a business manager is worth, not what you're actually paying yourself. And then you would keep a spreadsheet on the number of hours that you're engaging in these post-harvest activities. Jeff, does that feel like something that's acceptable to you?
yeah, I'm gonna maybe defer to Carlotta on that too a little bit. And that's I think we see that. I just haven't seen that for at least in the last several grants I've been administering. Usually there's an actual paper trail there, but I think that makes sense, and it does go back to like it has to be a reasonable rate. So what you're talking about there, Melissa, and supporting it with labor statistic data, and it has to, and there would be, a form you use. It's an in-kind affidavit where you're certifying to the labor that is specifically for that project at this many hours at this rate. And we would like to see it match up with what was projected in the application. Does that sound right, Carlotta?
Absolutely. So that you are, tracking it as you go. So you're documenting it. So, you don't wait until you're ready to do a reimbursement. You're tracking it all along. So yeah, exactly. Jeff was perfectly correct.
I think we're going to move on to the farmer panel now. We are going to go over a lot of this again in the last hour, but I do want to get to our farmer panel. So I do see all the questions and we will come back to those. Adam, I see your hand is up. If you want to put your question in the chat so you don't forget it, but or we could deal with that at our next Q&A session. So thank you so much, Carlotta and Jeff, for being here. They are our USDA rural development agents. They are the ones who will be scoring your applications, administrating them for you. They are incredible resources and very helpful, both for me as a farmer and as a grant writer. I have loved getting to work with them. I think Carlotta was going to stick around, so if there are questions that we need her for, she should be here for the rest of the morning, and Jeff might be in and out. Here is how to contact Carlotta. Jeff's contact information is up on the rural development website as well. And then once you have an application in process, you would be assigned to one of the state rural development business program specialists. We were going to take a break, but if it's okay, I'd like to just forge ahead because I do have our speakers in the waiting room and we'd like to get to our farmer panel. I am so excited today to introduce you to 3 farmers who have gone through the value-added process and who have been awarded grants, and let them tell their stories. So hopefully you are all here. Emily, if you could help me unmute our speakers so that we can introduce them.
Absolutely. They are all here. I've been making sure of it.
Excellent. So I would love to start with Grayson. Grayson Crane is he received an application last year. So Grayson, can you tell us the name of your farm, how long you've been farming, what are you farming, and tell us all about your grant.
Yeah, hi folks. Let me know if this isn't working. I'm recording from my car. I was just up getting some kelp for my sheep. So yeah, I'm Grayson. I own and operate Pink Moon Farm. I'm located in Eatonville, Washington, just kind of in between Tacoma and Olympia, probably about an hour and a bit from Seattle. We grow on 24 acres out here. Most of that's pasture. So we have maybe about 15 in pasture. and about 3+ acres in vegetables. Like Melissa said, I am coming into year 2 of my VAPG grant. I worked with Melissa last winter to put together an application that ended up getting funded, which is great. And that application was for around 3 specific crops. But to back it up just a scotch, I've been farming for, I think, 12 or 13 years now. I started farming in my 20s. I've taken some breaks here and there. But yeah, have worked on farms, managed other people's farms, and yeah, started Pink Moon. We're coming into our 6th year now, where we are in Eatonville. So yeah, VAPG wise, I put together, I was aware of the VAPG grant for a while, but kind of just assumed it wasn't for me with my operation. But that really changed for me when I did an NABC class 2 winters ago that I would definitely recommend. The name is a little hard to say. I'm going to give it my best shot, but Resilierator. Yeah, I can't say it. It's a mouthful, but I really recommend it. There's a lot of work around kind of the legal insurance aspects of farming. But anyhow, that program kind of woke me up to the fact that, my operation could qualify for a VAPG grant. Talking to, I think we heard from someone at Boldly Grown Farm, and that really kind of opened my mind up. So got in touch with Melissa, focused the Pink Moon grant on 3 crops that we grow a lot of and have kind of either high demand for or demand over kind of the shoulder seasons, because especially as veggie growers, folks in this room know that, if you can have stuff in spring and now, you're really set up well. So we focused that grant on kale, carrots, and tomatoes. Tomatoes being a big focus because it's our biggest seller. We make the most money off of it. It's really never been a problem selling tomatoes. And then kale because, our systems are set up really well to move through it. Carrots, again, something that's always in high demand for us. And kale and carrots in particular being things that, because my farm doesn't flood, we're really set up well to grow those year round. So yeah, I would say when and feel free, Melissa, to jump in and tell me to stop if I'm
You're good.
Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, we are part of the motivation of applying for this grant for me was how do I scale up a bit and get my farm to a place where, we're doing a bit more wholesale. We're able to add another market and able to expand our production a bit to kind of get to a better cruising altitude financially. And so far, this grant has been really successful for our farm business for that. We were able to use some of the funds to invest in some really nice professional marketing. So our website looks really nice now. We've got custom twist ties. And yeah, how do we as farmers not only grow the best thing that we can, but kind of keep that professional level up as we expand? That kind of seems like the next jump for my farm business. And yeah, I've seen this year, I think our wholesale's up at least double. I haven't put all the numbers together. And I think that's in part due to being able to expand production thanks to this grant and not having as much cost around that too. So I can keep going and going, but I will pass off to the next person for now unless there's something specific.
Oh, that's awesome, Grayson. It's so great to hear that you are double. I mean, that's amazing in just 1 year. So yeah, congratulations. That's awesome. So now I would love to have Genine talk, if you can unmute yourself. Genine just was awarded her very first VAPG grant, and so it's fresh in her mind what the process was like, as well as hopefully can tell us about your farm, what your grant was for, and what that process was like for you.
I will do that. Hi, I'm Genine Bradwin. I have been farming with my husband, Colin Barraclough, at Kirsop Farm for almost 30 years. And we started growing vegetables on a very tiny amount of space, and we've been slowly growing ever since. We added chickens in 2007, some broiler chickens, and then we moved to a bigger place and we added sheep and pigs and grain. And we kind of do a little bit of a lot of things. And in 2014, I think I saw an email about the VAPG, and I called Carlotta and was like, hey, I think I should have this for my bone broth business. I'm making broth and stock out of chicken. I have a value added product. And at the time, I didn't really understand it, and I wanted to buy equipment for my kitchen to improve the production. And she said, no, it's not for equipment. It's for, you can't use it to buy yourself some things, Genine. And I said, oh, well, never mind then. And then years went by, and I have a lot of things in common with Grayson from Pink Moon. I also attended the Resilerator course a couple of years ago. And that's where I met Melissa for the first time and heard her story and was like, oh, what now? What now? Tell me more about this. This is for me. This is something that works for me, and it's for the chickens. It's not for the bone broth. I mean, it could be in the future, but right now it's for the chickens that I'm already growing, and I'm already set up for this. It's already happening. All I have to do is hire Melissa to help me through the grant application process. I also took another class called Profiting from Your Pivot through Business Impact Northwest, or NABC. I get these two people confused, but they both helped me a lot. But the process that I went through to apply for the VAPG took me almost a year, and I met once a week with a business coach through Business Impact Northwest, and with Melissa, and with my best friend farmer for moral support and accountability. So I was spending 3 hours every week specifically working on this. And that's what it took for me, because my office is not as successful as my farm. My husband and I are great at producing things. We're great at selling things, and we're just okay at office. And so it took me a lot of focused effort to get there. But we got there, and I'm so excited that we got there. And we just did our first draw, which again, I had all of my support with me, and we got our papers together and we figured out how to scan them and send them to Melissa, and then Melissa sent them to Carlotta, and we'll get a check any minute now. It's going to be great.
Awesome. Genine, I'm wondering if you could explain to people why you shifted from applying for bone broth to applying for selling chickens.
Because I have attended this exact workshop several times, and I have heard Melissa's presentation a few times, where she explains that you can get this grant 3 times and you can't go backwards. Like if I got it for bone broth right now, which was my initial instinct the first time I learned about the grant, I was like, the value added product is the other thing. And if I would have done it for bone broth first, I could not go back and ask for it for chicken later. You have to go in order of things. So I can do it for chicken right now. And the next time I want to do it, I can do it for bone broth. And then if I want to do it again, I can do it for carrots and kale. I mean,
so just a couple things on there, just so that the people don't misunderstand. You can apply even more than 3 times, right? You're not limited to 3. But the reason I asked you to shift from bone broth to chickens is because you're producing more chickens. So we were able to ask for the maximum amount of money for chickens. Whereas if you had asked for bone broth, and this is the mistake I made in my own applications, was I did the chicken stock, but I was only able to get to about a $43,000 ask. If I had grown that part of my business on my own for a few years, I could have gotten to the $250,000 ask. So I always try and encourage people to apply for something you're already doing, do a market expansion, do more of what you're already successful doing, and then come back later. And so we can still do that bone broth in the future, but rather than a small grant, we can do a big grant. Yeah. Sorry I didn't want to contradict you, but also wanted to kind of get that in there and people's thoughts of thinking about what their project's going to be. So our third speaker is Dorcas Young, and she is actually on her third back-to-back value-added producer grant. And Dorcas, I would love to have you tell everyone what all three of yours have been about and what your journey has been with the value-added producer grant.
Hi everyone, can everybody hear me?
We can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first, I just want to say this. I just want to thank this moment. I want to just, I think I will cry if I go back history where I came from all the way to where I am right now. I think I'm in tears for this grace. First, let me say, I was doing a pea patch. That was 2015. When I moved here, I grew up in a big farm back in Africa. But when I moved here with my husband, the school teacher, and all the children, I didn't know what I was doing. I was going to school at the same time and raising kids and trying to get my degree. And I was going through that. Then I did get my degree, through all that. But 2015 and 2016, it was on April. It marked the first day that I can still remember on my mind on meeting Melissa and I think his name was George Yoke, in Mount Vernon, and with Jeff Volts. I stumbled into the program, but I didn't know where it was. But I sent email, and they said, yeah, there's a class. And then we'll be teaching this class. That was Jeff. And I went to that class to take it for value added. I knew that there was something I needed to do, but I didn't know how I would do it. I didn't have money. I had no money. I had nothing. My husband is a school teacher. I'm doing pea patch. I'm trying to sell cabbage at the farmer's market. It's not working. Everything was just like, where am I going? So I stumbled at this on April of 2016. Melissa Moeller and Jeff Walls and George Yoke, they were teaching this USDA value added. I took that class. And Melissa, she said she will be working with the other farmers to put this project to teach us. I went ahead, I said, I'm taking this. I don't know how many we were in that first class. It was tough, difficult. Melissa stayed with us and I stuck to it. And I got my first grant to produce kale chips, $50,000. I worked so hard on that. I had one car and my car was dying all the time. I did the farmer's market. And I'm telling you, I worked very hard. I saw there was a window for the future on that. I went through it, it sustained, and we were good at that. And I was able to sell my carriage to make some money. I keep on saving. The goal was to get a farm. In the long run, I didn't know how it's going to happen. I didn't know where it's going to be, but I knew that I have to do this. And it was tough and difficult with the kids in school, the family, and my husband, a school teacher. It was just the toughest thing, but I didn't give up. I kept going. Then I went back after the first one, took another class, and Melissa was the mentor then. She started teaching, and I said, I'm writing this one. She said, yeah, take this class. She went with all of us. We took the class, we filled our application. She worked with us with the heart and belief. She believed in us. So does Jeff Walls. They believe that with our assistance, we'll be able to get somewhere. And I did that. My first grant of $50,000 put me to get another $250,000 in, I think it was 2020 2020. And then that was a breakthrough. I was renting I'm renting the land from people. There were times like in 2021, I had a lot of beans at the Green Bank. I leased that land, and I'm telling you, they cut the water off.
Mm.
They cut the water off in July, and my beans died. Half of that died. You know, I had to carry water in a bucket. I just cry. But I keep going with my kids. I said, I'm going to do something. This is going to happen whether not or not. They cut the water off. My fava beans died. The WSA people came. They were interviewing people all over the Washington state. I mean, all over the country. They contacted me to come and interview me. They did. And I showed them exactly what is happening there. I'm leasing the land from somebody, and they cut off. The tilled where I was leasing the land. They told me in 2019, they said, well, we're going to give this area to somebody else. I put a fence there. I did everything there. So I had this project that I'm working on, and I'm facing all this. And I'm thinking, what's going to happen? But my beans at Green Bank, that half of it, I dried them. And they took the greenhouse where I was drying them. That's the second thing. And I went and talked to the board at Island County, and they gave me, one of the guys there, they gave me a building at Green Bank as a storage. And the man was saying, we have to help this woman. And my fava beans were able to get there and get it dried there. And I was able to start selling my beans, dried beans, because I had three kinds, Scarlet Runner, fava beans, Rockwells, and a Thai size. Those were the four ones that I was able to succeed, but the half of the other ones died because the water. So I went ahead and struggled with my beans, and my grant was supportive. I keep on going, and I talked to Brendan. I was just communicating with Melissa, with Brendan, with all these people to say, please help me. And they were there to stand with me. So that grant was successful, and I kept on saving the money. I kept on saving. I don't buy shoes. I don't buy anything. Everything we make left over from the family, we put it aside. The goal is to get a farm. The goal is to go somewhere with this, to train my kids to be able to do this. And that happened. So my third grant, I went ahead back to Melissa and I said, I'm applying. We were the Tilt Alliance, and I said, I'm applying for the next one. She said, yeah, go ahead and apply. So I went ahead and she helped me. I said, review it, look at it. And she did. She looked at it, and we went and signed the documents at Mount Vernon. I tell you, my spirit was uplifted that time. I knew I have to get something. So I went ahead and you know, and filled the application, and I got awarded. Let me tell you something that I'm so grateful for, Melissa and Jeff Waltz and the team of the NABC. I'm in the board with NABC. I was so thankful. I got awarded. Guess what? I started to work with FSA, Farmland Trust. The last 2 years, we hunted for the farm to match what I have desired. I did a presentation, I did everything. And there was a farmer in the peninsula. They have been raising farm in their pasture for about maybe another 10, 20 years or something like that. They said, we need a farmer. And I went and met these people. They were so humbled that they wanted to sell this farm to me. The value added grant sustained me throughout. I do the farmers market. I do the fava bean pesto. That's the one what I'm working on right now. And that is put me on the top. And I was able to sell a lot of that, shell them, and be able to produce and do all the 5 farmers market in Seattle and 3 stores that they are getting it. I'm going into Peninsula. I've got already 3 stores. As I started there, they are going to be carrying my pesto at this moment. So the value added has really sustained me. I had nothing from the beginning, nothing, no money, nothing. That 50,000 brought me. Right now, I'm owning a farm. It's about 18 acres of land. And I'm moving. Right now, I'm moving. I'm in my car. We are moving to the farm. We are already established. There's a commercial kitchen. Everything is there. I'm moving forward to do this. And to be able to show other young people how they can. My goal is to train young people, to be able to show them this, that hard work I did, it has paid off. It has paid off. It was tough, it was difficult, but the support I got from NABC, the support I got from Melissa Moeller and Jeff and Brandon, these people are great. And the new team that is right now, they are just they are doing the VAPG. They're very supportive. My third one, I was able to attend this and they have supported me. So that's my story. My story is just like I said, I'm in tears. At the same time, I'm so grateful to be able to show someone that VAPG can lift you up from nothing to be where you are.
Thank you for
I just
sharing
want to
that
thank
story.
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean,
Yes.
truly, it's your hard work that has lifted you up. That's your hard work that has brought you to where you are today, moving into your farm. I didn't realize that today was moving day. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. So, if you didn't hear it, she got 3 back-to-back VAPGs. The first one for kale chips for 50,000, then 250,000 for her beans, and then another 250,000 for fava bean pesto. So Dorcas is a dynamo of energy, and I'm so excited to see her move onto her own land and be able to control her own farm. And yeah, Carlotta, I think that needs to be like a VAPG video or something, her story. Do any of
Yes.
you participants have any questions for our panelists? Questions about what it was like to put together an application or what it's like to have and administrate an application? I'd love to give you a chance to ask those. Adam, go ahead and unmute if you have a question for one of our panelists or all of them.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I think this one's probably most relevant to Grayson. So the 3 you mentioned kale, carrots, and tomatoes. Was your method the enhanced production, i.e., like the organic? Is that the approach you took with your submission?
Yeah, so we took the approach that it is locally marketed. So
Okay.
I'm not organically certified. I did end up getting another third-party certification this year, certified naturally grown, if anyone's curious. But yeah, the value add is that it's being marketed locally within 100 miles.
So how does that work? I guess I'm a little confused because in the upfront of the presentation, it mentioned that the grant can't be used for the production of stuff, but the local approach, like you're producing produce. So can you just go over like what things actually fell under the funds that you received through the grant?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think what the question you're touching on is, I think, the question that kept me from applying for years. So basically, the way that I think about it is the kale, the carrots, the tomatoes are a raw commodity until they hit our wash pack. So the kale is dirty, the tomatoes are unprocessed, the carrots are unprocessed, and then our processing begins as soon as they hit the wash pack. And for the tomatoes, they're not being washed. It's more that they're being marketed and transported around. So we do count, it's not a very significant amount, but there is, time spent washing and packing kale and carrots, packing and sorting tomatoes, especially heirloom tomatoes. They're certainly not all perfect when they come out of the tunnel or the field or wherever. So that is where that process starts. And then it continues as we transport that around. So, we're bringing probably, like 100 bunches of carrots, 200 bunches of carrots to market. That cost of traveling to market from the farm counts. The staff time of someone driving to the market, the staff time of someone being at the market counts. If we're doing a wholesale order that's got 300 pounds of tomatoes on it, the time and money to take those tomatoes from our farm to whatever wholesaler counts. And then for us on like overhead things, I think I heard a little bit of Jeff talking about percentages of bookkeepers and things like that. We came up with a percentage based on my previous 3-year financials of what amount the kale, carrots, and tomatoes make up of my total income, and then use that percentage to calculate kind of the percentage of the bookkeeper, the percentage of our overall liability insurance, things like that. I would caution, and I'm sure Carlotta can comment on this too. I think I started with a lot of expenses, some of which ended up being so small because of that percentage. I've just kind of dropped, and that might shift around my total expenses. But I also, farms cost so much money, as you all know, and are likely gathered here for. So I'm not super worried about where that will show up elsewhere. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was really helpful. And then in terms of like when you say a portion of the staffing time to kind of transport things to market, to be at market, are you then taking like a percentage of what like those crops are of sales and then using that as a factor that then take, because I imagine you're taking things beyond just kale, carrots, and tomatoes to the market. Are you then taking just a rough percentage of that to then quantify like how much of that can count towards the grant?
No, actually, for that, we would be driving the van. If we went to market with just kale, it would cost the same amount if I had just the kale, or if I had actually in our market van, which is why I'm gesturing behind me. But it would cost the same amount if we filled this thing with kale, or if we filled it with kale, radishes, turnips, whatever. So the cost for the mileage and the staff time at market remains 100% of that cost for my grant. And feel free to hop in if it sounds like maybe some things are changing for the future, but yeah, feel free to hop in, Carlotta or Melissa, to correct me or advise further.
Carlotta, did you have something to say to that?
No, I'm just totally agreeing with him.
Good, good. Any other questions for our panelists? I hope you see there that if you're selling a local product, you are selling something that has added value, because people are willing to pay more for a local tomato than a tomato produced in Mexico, right? People want to buy local, so that's adding value. So I don't think I've ever met an agricultural producer who wasn't producing value added when you use that definition. Any other questions specifically for our panelists before we take a break? No? Okay. So I'd like to go ahead and take a 5-minute break now. We'll come back. I'll take you through tips and tricks and how to get ready to apply. And then we will wrap up our time with any and all questions that anyone wants to ask. I do have the list of questions that have been put in the chat that weren't answered yet, but we'll just take a 5-minute break, come back at 10:45. Please don't go. All right, it is 10:45. We'll go ahead and continue our presentation. So I'm going to talk to you today about the application process. So Carlotta talked about the regulations and the rules, and I'm going to approach things from a slightly different perspective. I'm going to tell you tips and tricks and best practices, what you need to be doing now to prepare to apply for this grant. So I hope, first of all, you're inspired that you should be applying for this grant. I really think every farmer should be applying for the Value Added Producer Grant, particularly the small and medium-sized family farmers who don't have access to as much capital as larger corporate farms can have. So please think about this and consider applying. So the first step that I want you to think about is to determine what your value-added project should be. So like with talking to Genine, she had an idea of what turning something into something else, but that's not the only method for adding value. Just doing something locally is adding value. Now, she did one where it was a change of state from a live chicken to chicken meat. But in Grayson's case, it was locally sold vegetables. So the first thing I want you to think about is, what do you already produce? Don't think about necessarily just new products for this grant. Think about what you're already doing and ask yourself if you can produce and sell more of it. If there's a high demand for your product, or if you put more land into use for that produce product, whatever it is, can you sell more of it? And I would ask you to consider that for your application rather than for something new. You can do new products, but market expansion grants are much easier to write, and I think much more effective than brand new feasibility, the brand new ones, sorry. So the third question I'm going to ask you to do under this category is, how can you narrow the scope of your application so that you can ask for more grants in the future, and what value added methodology should you use? So on narrowing your grant ask, you can apply for and received back-to-back VAPG grants. I did 3. Dorcas has done 3. I've had several other people I've worked with who are on their 3rd. I'm hoping we're going to be able to do a 4th with Dorcas and some of the other people too. I moved away from farming to helping farmers, so I didn't get to pursue my 4th, but it's definitely a possibility. The thing is, though, new applications must be substantially different in terms of products and or markets, and should not merely be extensions of previously funded applications. So I want you to think about that right up front before you apply the first time. The most heartbreaking grants that I have seen where somebody has worked with someone else, and that grant writer listed every single product that they grow and raise and sell, and every product that they might in the future. So it doesn't leave us any room to come back and ask for another application. In the case of one yogurt producer, they mentioned 5 different types of yogurt that they wanted to produce and sell. Well, during the grant period, they only did 2, but because they named all 5 by name, they now cannot come back and ask for another VAPG grant for the 3 varieties that they didn't do. So if you can keep your grant really tight and narrow on the smallest number of products and or varieties that you can, it leaves the door open for those future grants. Okay, so Carlotta had talked about the 5 different methods of adding value to your product. You're only going to choose one. You don't want to try and talk about all of them. That's not going to give you any extra points, and it's going to dilute your application. The first 3, I think, are the most relevant. The last 2, I've never seen an application for those, and I don't even know how you would do that. So that change in state, this is the most obvious one. This is the one that everybody thinks about when they think about value added. It's that irreversible process that alters your commodity and enhances its value. So the apples in this bag can never go back to being a whole apple. They are permanently altered. Cheese can never go back to being milk. Yarn can never go back to being wool. Packaged meat can't go back to live meat. Now you notice in here in this example that there is a non-food product. So the change of state category, you can do non-food products. So If you have a change of state, this is a really obvious and easy one to go for. So that would be my first choice if you can. If not, locally produced. Are you selling and marketing it locally? Locally meaning within your state or within 400 miles of your farm. And this can be any food product. In this category, you cannot sell flowers, you can't sell yarn, you can't sell something that is not going to be eaten by a human. You can't do dog food. But if you are selling a food product and you're selling it locally, you can apply under this category. The third category that you might want to consider is enhanced production methods. So if you're selling it organic, free range, biodynamic, some way where you're going to explain to the reviewers that by using that recognized set of production practices, you're going to enhance value and be able to sell it for more than another farmer who's not using those methods. So those would be the three. So pick one of those three methods. So the next step, I think where are we on step one? I don't know why this says step three. Sorry about that. Ignore the numbering. So I want you to understand your numbers. Before you consider applying, I want you to really understand your numbers well. All of us farmers are great at growing things, at spending time in the field, but you also have to put on your business manager hat and know your numbers. So how much have you produced in the last 3 years? How many pounds, ounces, gallons, whatever unit of measure you use? What have you done in the last 3 years? And how much more do you think you can do in the next 3 years, looking into the future? What have your sales been for the last 3 years? And how much more do you think you can sell in the next 3 to 5 years? Who are your current customers and who would buy from you if you had more to sell? Think about those three things, write that all up into a business plan or marketing plan, and you're going to be well on your way to being ready to apply for this grant. Okay, so the next step, and maybe this should have been the first step, is you need to make sure you're operating legally in every aspect. If you're going to be asking for money from the federal government, please do not be breaking the law when you apply. I mean, really. So do you have all your appropriate licenses, both state and federal? Are you employing people legally? I know that this is a really common thing in farming. I have another training session that I do on why this is an important thing to do, not just from a coloring within the rules, but for protecting yourself. So make sure that you have people on payroll if they're working for you and that you're paying all the appropriate taxes. Are you either a U.S. citizen or do you reside in the U.S. after legal admittance? If you cannot say yes to that, please do not apply for this grant. Do you have the authority to act on behalf of your organization? This is, if you're going to be the one signing your application, you need to make sure that you have that authority. I did have one application that was rejected. The person who was farming thought she had the authority to act on the behalf of the farm, and she didn't. It was a legacy farm, several generations. So make sure that the person who's signing it is the one who has the right to do that. Are you current on your IRS tax filings, or do you have any IRS judgments against you? If those are the case, go take care of that before you apply for federal money. Okay, so the next thing I really want you to make sure you have is I want you to have a written business plan for your entire operation. Couple great resources on that are USDA has this website, www.farmers.gov, where they have a very helpful template for producing a business plan. And now remember, we're applying to the federal government. So if the federal government has a template, that's a great template to use, right? They spend a lot of time and effort in putting together a template that they like. So we're going to use that. And to that end, this winter, NABC will be doing a business plan course. I'll be running that. We'll have a webinar similar to this one, followed by a couple weeks where we work together through creating a business plan that will set you up for success for applying for the VAPG for next year. It will also set you up to be able to apply for the state infrastructure grant when that becomes available next fall. If you're not aware of that one is truly an amazing one for farmers that allows you to buy equipment, build buildings, buy vehicles, put in a wash pack area, or cold storage, things that the value added producer grant does not allow you to do, but that the state has created a grant program that covers that, or truly any other grant program that you come across. Once you have a written business plan, grant applications become really easy. This one's challenging, but some of them are just a copy paste. You can copy your farm history and who you are, and copy out of that things, and then tailor it for that grant. So if you don't have a written business plan, I would highly recommend that you do, not just because it's a good exercise, but because it's going to help you get money, right? Which is always a great goal. Okay, so the next question is, do you have a marketing plan for the value-added product? So the business plan is for your entire operation, but for applying for the VAPG, I want you to have a marketing plan that's specific to only the value-added product that you're going to be applying for under the grant. So you're going to take your business plan as a starting point, and you're going to narrow it in on a marketing plan. NABC has a template that you can use. I'll have Emily send that out following this presentation. Maybe you have to fill out an evaluation form to get it. I don't know. What do you think, Emily? Get people
I
to
like that. Make it contingent.
There we go. So, and if this is a new product for you and you want to apply for an emerging market grant, you have to have a feasibility study that's done by a qualified third-party consultant. You cannot do that yourself. I do encourage people to not apply for the emerging market grant. I'd much rather see you selling it yourself for 2 years and apply for a market expansion grant, because this feasibility study is not a requirement, and it also gives you some time to figure out what you really want to do and if your markets can support that. But if you want to do a brand new product, you do need to go pay somebody to do one of these feasibility studies. You're probably too late to be able to do that for the 2025 cycle. The grant isn't open yet. We don't know what the deadline is, but that information could open up any day now. These feasibility studies are not cheap and they're not quick. You're looking at maybe $12,000 to $15,000. I'm not really sure in terms of places to find someone to do that for you. NABC has some staff that can do that for you. SCORE is another great place. And I'm sure there's other places that you can find somebody, but you do need to go find somebody who is a qualified professional to produce that for you. Okay. The next step. So at this point, if you've got all those things done, you're ready to start applying, or at least prepare to apply. Once the application is open, the Rural Development website will have, they'll open up an application portal. This is brand new. None of us have seen it. I was a beta tester for the national office, so I did get to see a preview of it. I don't exactly know what it's going to look like. It's supposed to really help streamline the process and take away some of the sections in the old Word-based template that aren't relevant to you. So even though you can't get into the portal yet, there are things that I would like you to be doing to get ready to apply, going back to those other steps of making sure your business licenses are up to date and that you're creating a business plan and a marketing plan. So to complete your application, just a reminder, Carlotta went over this, but here's the things that you're going to need to have lined up. I like to put these all into the marketing plan as much as we can, because then it's a copy paste from your marketing plan into the template. So you're going to need a project budget. How are you going to spend the money? If you're going for the full amount, it's a $500,000 project where you're contributing $250,000 of something, mostly your time and commodity, and you're asking for USDA to pay $250,000 in cash dollars into your account. So you're going to want a project budget for that $500,000 to show how you're going to spend that money. What activities that are relevant are you going to spend the money on? You want projections for how much of the value-added product you can produce. So going back to what I asked you before of knowing what you did the 3 years before and looking forward 3 to 5 years, how much more can you produce? How much more can you sell? Who are you going to sell to? Having that written business or marketing plan is going to be a requirement of any application other than the simplified $50,000 or less application. You need to make sure that your business is in good standing, all your licenses are up to date, and you're going to need to verify your in-kind matching. So those are the pieces of the application that you need to have. Okay, so here is what the rural development website looks for value-added producer grants. Application window TBA. I check this pretty much every day, and NABC will definitely let you know once this opens. I actually sometimes get up after midnight just to come check it. A little bit odd that way. So they're saying that the application period is delayed, and check grants.gov or this website to let you know when the application period opens up. Once it opens up, it's going to be a 60 to 90 day window. You really want to have as much of your application done beforehand as possible. This is a challenging grant to put together, and it's definitely not something that you want to wait to do. But here's where you're going to find the information on that. Okay. So some things that you'll want to do ahead of time. You're going to want to register in sam.gov to get a unique entity identifier. You're going to need to obtain level 2 e-authentication. This is a brand new requirement. On the portal, they're going to have a VAPG self-assessment survey. They don't have that out there yet, but I would highly encourage you to go through that exercise once that is available. That will get you in touch with your local rural development agent who will make sure that you're on the right track. And then you're going to complete the application through the grant application portal. So I want to look at those first two things and how to do those, because you can do those and should do those right now if you're considering applying for this grant or any other federal grants. Okay, so the first one, applying in sam.gov. So SAM stands for System for Award Management. And this is how they determine if you're eligible to receive money from the federal government. So you're going to go to www.sam.gov. Now, when you click on Get Started to start an entity, it's going to be critical that the name you use in this portal, registering in sam.gov, is the same entity name exactly that you have your EIN, your with the IRS, your UBI, your license with the state, and if you have an LLC, what you registered for the Secretary of State. You need those all to match. If they don't, it's going to cause problems and you may not be able to get through. So if the name of your business is business name, comma, LLC, make sure you include the comma. I mean, really, you really want to make sure these match. You want to make sure those addresses match. If they don't, go get that all cleaned up first. If you are operating as a sole proprietor, you would register under your name, DBA, the farm name. I would encourage you, if you're in Washington State, particularly, to consider an LLC. We're not going to go into the reasons for that here, but that does make things a little bit cleaner and easier for you. It's free in Washington. You do not need to pay somebody to help you establish an LLC. But for many reasons, I think it's a good place to start. Once you get bigger and want to be a corporation, then go talk to a lawyer and figure out all that. That's kind of beyond my skill set. Okay, so back to sam.gov. So you're going to create a new sam.gov login. Make sure you remember what it is. It's going to be hard to find it otherwise. And when you get through it and it says, what do you want to do? You have 3 options. Just click the first one. You want to register for financial assistance awards only. You're not going to bid on federal contracts unless you're producing things for the military or other such things. And you do need more than just a unique entity ID. So click that first box and go through all of the registration pieces in there. It's going to be a lot of just putting your name in over and over again if you're a small or medium-sized family farm. That this portal is really designed for entities that are much larger than you. So just keep that in mind. We're like, well, I already put my name and address in as the applicant. Well, now you're going to do it as the financial advisor and as the bookkeeper and, you know, whatever all the other roles are that they have for you, unless you want those to be separate people. But just keep it simple. This can take a couple of weeks to get approval for. So do that today if you have time. If you have time this afternoon or sometime when you have a spare hour to go through this, I would recommend doing that right away. Okay, so after that is done, this is brand new. So even if you've had a value-added producer grant or other kind of grant award in the past, they have changed it. So this year, in order to use that grant application portal, you need to have level 2 authentication. I hope I'm not losing everybody here, getting into the weeds too much, but I just thought this was going to be really important because it is a change. So after you have that SAM.gov registration, they'll give you a unique entity ID number. You want to file that away, make sure so that when you put your application together, you can put that in. But that will also give you a login.gov. So login.gov is the government's website for accessing all kinds of government information. You may have one personally for your Social Security, but you want to have one with your business address. And you want to have that be separate from your personal if you at all can. So now that you have that, you're going to go to eauth.usda.gov, www.eauth.usda.gov. There is a link on this through the Rural Development website. So if you don't want to write that down or you forget, don't worry about it. The only website you really need to remember is that value-added producer grant one for rural development, or just make sure you're on NABC's mailing list and Emily will send you all kinds of great information when it's available. Okay, so we're going to go to eauth.usda.gov. And you're going to link this account with your login.gov. Unfortunately, I didn't capture that screenshot before I did it because I'm like, I got to understand how to do this myself before I talk anybody else through it. So you link it to login.gov. After you're done with that, then you need to choose an authentication method. And there's quite a few listed here. In the past, add phone number was sufficient. That's a level 1 authentication. They need you to have level 2 authentication. So there's 3 different methods that you could use, and we're going to go through each of those here. So the first is add face or touch unlock. This is going to be the easiest one. So a lot of computers have some kind of a, you know, I don't know about you, but for me, when I come to my laptop, it looks at my face and says, oh, okay, it's you. You don't have to put in a password. If your laptop can do that, this is going to be the easiest method. The farmer applicant needs to be the one to establish this. I can't do this for you. Once you have your application started, then someone else can help you with it. So if your computer can do face or touch unlock, choose that, go through the steps and use that method. If you can't do that, or you're going to be on something like a library computer, not your own, you would need to do one of the other 2 methods. So one of them is an authentication app. This is all information right from the eAuth website, so you don't need to remember this, but there are apps out there that let you use your phone as an authenticator or these other websites. So you can choose that as an option. If that isn't an option, your third option is to have a security key. So these security keys, you would buy it at Best Buy or Amazon. I'm sure there's other places that sell them. Make sure that it's a security key that meets the fast identity online standards. This is a picture of one that my husband recommended, who is in the computer industry. And what that does is it plugs into your computer and does the authentication for you. I'm sorry that this is so complicated, but this is, once you get through all this, it'll be like, oh yeah, now it's really easy. It just kind of logs in for me. So that's what that setting up that key would look like. Okay, so just for review, getting ready to apply, we've registered in sam.gov, we've obtained that level 2 e-authentication, and once it becomes available, I'd love for each of you to go through the VAPG self-assessment survey before you start your application. That will be on Rural Development's website. It's not available yet, but that should be open whenever they decide to open the grant. Could be any day. And then you're going to complete your application through the portal. The portal will guide you through all the different steps you need to take, all the information that USDA is looking for. Okay, so just some reminders on what the value-added producer grant is and is not. It's not a technical assistance program. It's not a job training program. It's not intended to teach you how to farm. It's not intended to be used as a continuous stream of capital to underwrite your business. And it's not intended to buy equipment or real estate. You can't buy land, buildings, tractors, trucks. You just can't do that. But there are a lot of things that it does want to fund. And so I want you to really kind of dial your thinking into letting them pay for the things that they want to pay for and finding other ways, like Dorcas did, to get herself into farmland, to buy the other things that you want to buy. Okay. So the purpose of this grant is to help agricultural producers successfully process, market, and sell value-added products. It's to help you expand your markets, and it's designed to strengthen rural economies. And so as you're thinking through your application, think about all the things that are outside of production after you've got, post-harvest, after it's out of the ground, after it's out of the field. Those are the kinds of activities that USDA wants to cover in this grant. And now I want to go back to the questions. So I'm going to roll back to the questions that were asked during Carlotta's presentation that didn't get answered. Here's my contact information, how you can find me. Let's see. Okay, so Corey had asked if we know what the deadline would be. Emily did answer that, but just so that everybody hears it, we don't know what the deadline will be. They will announce the deadline when they open the application. They're hoping to standardize on the same time period every year, but so far they haven't. So every year it's slightly different. NABC is going to be watching this every day, and we will make sure that you know when it's open and what the deadline will be. It doesn't change that much every year. So working on an application now, using the resources that were used last year is a great place to start. It's a good way to wrap your head around what it is that you want to apply for and gather all the information that you're going to need once the application portal is open. Okay. Let's see. Vala asked, could using a neighbor's land be considered third-party in-kind contribution value toward math? Oh, then she said disregard this question. Yeah, if you're using your neighbor's land to produce something, no, then the value of the neighbor's land doesn't count because that's part of production. And we are drawing this red line in the sand between producing things and processing, marketing, selling, and distributing things. USDA with this grant wants to pay for all of those things on this side of the line, but they don't want to pay for production, anything involved in producing it. Let's see. I just want to get through the questions that are in the chat first and then open it up for any other questions that have come up. Kiefer asked, are the restrictions based off where the project is located, i.e. if the location is zoned an urban area versus a rural area? And Carlotta answered that. Yeah, it's about farms wherever farms are. This is under rural development, and there are some rural development programs that are only for rural areas, but this one is for farmers anywhere.
I saw that Adpia had mentioned earlier asking for a list of places that would do feasibility studies, and I will look into that and maybe try to come up with a handful. I don't unfortunately think there's not like a list that exists of consultants, and my advice would be just based on what I've seen at NABC and when we hire contractors to get feasibility studies, is to find someone, maybe even like a professor at a college who's an expert in the field of whatever project you're going to work on, and then talk to them. If they can't author it, they might have some grad students who want the experience to get their name on something. So they could probably do it for like a lower cost, and just put it out there, because that's what we had a cheap project I worked on, and that's what I ended up doing. I asked professors to help me, and then they had a student who and it was excellent. Like, I feel like some of the consulting firms I see who charge a ton don't always produce as good of quality of reports as just a really passionate person who's an expert in their field. So that's just a little piece of advice that's not as helpful as a list, which I will try to grab a few resources when I send it out. But that would be my advice.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Emily. Carlotta, do you have, I know you can't recommend specific contractors, but do you have other avenues? Like Emily mentioned, a college professor. Do you have other avenues that you have seen that people have used to find someone to do a feasibility study?
Not off the top of my head. We don't see a lot of feasibility studies, and I haven't recently. So I may be able to come up with some feasibility study providers. If I, look in some of our previous grants and maybe ask around with my co-workers. But we don't have like a long list. And we have seen, similar to what Emily was saying, like WSU extensions, possibly through there, and maybe some other nonprofits, but just not off the top of my head. It is harder to find them than we would hope. So.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing, Emily, for NABC to be working on kind of curating that list. With Carlotta's help, that would be really wonderful to have on hand. But I hope you do hear me saying that if you do a market expansion project, you don't need to have a feasibility study. So once you've been selling your product for 2 years at the time you apply, you don't need to have that feasibility study. So that would save you quite a bit of time and money. But if you do want a feasibility study because you're not sure that a product would be successful in the marketplace, then that's when you'd want to do a feasibility study, or if you want to do an emerging market grant. Julie had asked if you can use for alcohol making wine grapes into wine, and Carlotta said yes. I have done a couple of these. Absolutely, that is an irreversible state from grape to wine. Yeah. Can this grant be used to go from non-organic to certified organic status? That's an interesting question. Carlotta, do you want to address that?
Well, there's not enough background from the person who made the question. I mean, you would never use this grant specifically for that. And so I'm not sure if a part of the whole project could, that may not be included, but you certainly wouldn't do the whole grant just for that. And I think, maybe a more in-depth conversation with myself or with Melissa would be helpful.
Yeah, I would say that that could be a small piece of a bigger grant, but you would need to be really careful because there is the organics certification cost share program. So you can't do double dipping into federal programs. So you can't get reimbursed for so this is for somebody who's already organic. So I was an organic farmer, but I couldn't in my VAPG reimbursement grants get reimbursed for the annual fees because there is another grant that pays for those, right? So you do need to be really careful with that. But just for going from non-organic to organic, that wouldn't be a very strong application. If you just had that as a part of a bigger, I'm going to start selling my carrots to, I want to sell to more people. So I want to be able to sell to the grocery stores that want to buy organic food. It could be that piece of it, right? Where I'm going to reach and be able to sell into PCC. And as part of that requirement, they need me to be certified organic. So that's part of my marketing plan is I'm going to shift my operation to be certified organic to reach new customers in new markets. But the expenses involved in that are going to be pretty minor. But it would be a strong application. right? Could add. Let's see. Kiefer asked, can a nonprofit that creates a product for farmers, turning their byproduct green waste into compost qualify? Carlotta, you want to take that one?
Not a nonprofit.
Yeah, there was that
I don't,
that agricultural group. There was one group category that was nonprofits.
right. So possibly under that. And I
Yeah.
did see an email pop up from Kiefer on this subject, so I'll probably address it further with him. He had more detail in the email.
Yeah.
But yeah, nonprofit unless it falls under the is it majority owned? I can't remember what are the other
I can't
applicant
remember those.
yeah. So I'll be addressing it, I guess, separately with him.
Good. Well, that takes us through all of the questions that came up with the chat. Anyone want to raise their hand and ask questions about your specific operation or value-added products that you'd like to try? I'd
Did
love
we
to.
get to the other question? Just sorry if we did, and I'm interrupting, but I noticed there was a, can you explain the 50% again in real life example? Did we get to that one? I'm not sure. I just want to make
Sure,
sure.
I'm sorry. I think I did skip that one too. Thank you for keeping me on track. Yeah. So 50% of the project money needs to be provided by you, and 50% is provided by USDA. So you can do your matching funds. Let me see if I can find the slide for that, because that would be really helpful. Matching. Okay. So yeah, you're providing 50% and they provide 50%. Where is it? There was a better slide. Where was that? Oh, maybe that was our slide. Okay, so when you put your budget together, you are going to come up with supplies that you need, marketing campaigns that you need, maybe a social media manager, redesigning your website. All of those would be things that you would be asking USDA to pay for, but you need to provide 50% of the total project. So we're going to do that with cash. We're going to do that with the value of the labor of the farm owners, and we're going to do that with the commodity value of the commodity that you're turning into a value-added product. So using my farm as an example, I raised chickens for eggs, and so the commodity value of my eggs I was able to determine by looking at what other non-organic eggs sell for, because I was selling organic eggs, and I came up with the value of those eggs at, I want to say, $2.95 a dozen. I sold for an average wholesale price of $7.25 a dozen. So I added value over the non-organic price from, what did I say, $2.99? I can't remember. $2.99 to $7.25. That's the value I added. But when I in my application, I was able to say I was going to contribute so many thousands of dozens of eggs at a cost of $2.99 a dozen. So that's my contribution to the project. It's kind of fuzzy federal math. I'm contributing something that I produced with my own farm. I'm contributing it to this project, and I get a value for that. I'm not selling it to anybody. I'm not losing it. I still maintain ownership of it, but it's worth $2.99 a dozen before I've added value to that. So USDA lets me include that as part of my in-kind contribution. So when I work with people, the first thing I do is I help them figure out, what would your product be worth if you sold it without adding value? So if it's applesauce that you're doing, what are the apples worth if you just sold the apples? Or if it's wine grapes, if you just sold your wine grapes by the ton, what would you get for those? And we determine that number first by looking at the Agricultural Marketing Service website, where USDA tells us what commodities are worth. They don't have all the commodities in there. And on some, it's a little harder to determine the number. So in my example with the eggs, I did a market survey in my local grocery store and took the average price of a non-organic egg to establish that $2.99. With wine grapes, working with that applicant, they purchased wine grapes from another producer and sold some of theirs to other people who make wine. So they had an established price per ton for those grapes. So you're going to take that commodity price and you're going to contribute that to the project as part of your match. In addition, your time is valuable. And whether you pay yourself or not, a lot of farmers don't pay themselves, or they don't pay themselves at market rates, or they'll do a draw at the end of the year with what's left over. But what we want to do is determine the value of that time. Anyone who's in the family can contribute that time, whether they receive a paycheck or not, at the Department of Labor rate for their business. So if you are running your own business, you are a business manager, and we'll look at the Department of Labor for your industry and area and determine a rate for your hours, and then you'll track those hours, and that's part of your contribution to the project. So when you go to do a reimbursement draw, so going back to my egg example, I would give Carlotta a spreadsheet that says this year I produced, or I'm sorry, this month I produced, I don't know, however many dozens of eggs, and then multiply that number by $2.99. So that's what I have contributed for eggs. I have spent this many hours at the business manager rate that I had established in my application, and that's my contribution. In addition, I can contribute cash. You can also do those third-party contributions as well, but those are more rare. So I do my contribution, and that I go and I buy the supplies, I hire the marketing director, I pay somebody to redo my website. I go and I pay for those things. I put all of that together in a spreadsheet that says I've contributed $10,000 worth of my time and my eggs, and I have spent $10,000 on these other eligible expenses. USDA, please cut me a check for $10,000. And so does that answer the question? Whoever asks that, go ahead and unmute yourself and see if I clarified that enough.
Melissa,
yes.
This is Jeff.
Yes.
Just to throw something in there, and just a gentle reminder, it is a reimbursement grant. So those expenses have to have been paid for when you do request a reimbursement.
Yes, thank you for that, Jeff. That is really important. You first have to go spend the money and then get reimbursed for it. You're not going to get awarded this money and they're going to cut you a check for $250,000. It doesn't work that way. You're going to go spend the money for the month, let's say the month of October, because it'll start, your project could start in October of next year, 25. And then first week of November, just like Genine and I just did, you'll go, okay, what did we do? What did we spend in October? What things did you buy that were part of your application? What did you contribute? And then put that together for things that have already been spent and ask for a reimbursement from USDA. Corey asks, is there a limit to the number or frequency of draws? My understanding, and Carlotta and Jeff, you can chime in here, is that once a month, no more than once a month. You don't have to do it every month. For me, it was when the pain point of doing the paperwork was worth what the check would be. That's when I would do a draw until I got into a good rhythm. And then I think I did get salon. But at first it was like, oh, do I really want to do all that paperwork to get $500? The project's just barely getting off the ground, so maybe skip that.
Add on that I did get the infrastructure grant, and I obviously didn't have enough funds available. Otherwise I wouldn't be applying for the grant in the first place. And so I just kept submitting all my receipts with we can only do monthly for those. So every month I submitted what I had to keep the funds flowing to reinvest to get the next reimbursement. So that worked for me. If anybody is wondering, you can keep the funds flowing that way.
As long as you have the match, that can be the other challenge in this particular grant. So the WSDA infrastructure grant, I don't believe that has a match, but this one does. So you need to be having your contribution, and that might slow you down. So don't get the grant and immediately go spend $50,000 redoing your website and doing all these other things when you're not yet to your strawberry season, and so have any strawberries to contribute. You want to be really watching that and being careful of that. I see that Emily posted the evaluation. The way we get funded, the way we're able to put these webinars on is by having funders who want to support the work that we do, and they all want to see evaluation forms to show that we are being successful at this. So I know we're down to a smaller number of people in the room still. If each and every one of you could right now go to that Google Doc and fill out that evaluation form, Emily and I would really appreciate that. That keeps us rolling and able to put on resources such as this. I would love to hear other questions. What are other thoughts that you're having, concerns, questions about whether you're eligible, anything?
I have two questions. This is Lindsay Meyer with Smooth Slayer Farm. So I'm a culinary and tea herb farm primarily. And I was just wondering, so I grow a lot of raw ingredients, and there's a lot of crossover between different products. And I know you had mentioned if you apply for multiple grants, they have to be considerably different. But does that entail like the raw ingredient itself, or is it more the product that is the different thing you're going for?
Yeah, it's different products. A different product would be absolutely acceptable. So just to, I know teas, let's say you've got chamomile, and you're going to have that chamomile into 10 different varieties. I wouldn't do 10 different applications because they're all going to be really small unless you're a really big operation. But maybe a simpler example would be somebody who grows apples, and they're going to do one application for selling more apples to more people in more places. They're going to finish that one. And then maybe they're going to do applesauce. And now maybe they're going to do apple butter. And now maybe they're going to do dried apples or apples and cutlets, anything. Oh, the apple syrup. You're using the apples each time, but they're different products. The other thing that you can do is into different geographic regions. I tend to steer away from those because I really like how clean it is to have a different product. But if you are only selling locally and now you want to sell nationally, you have a product that you can sell on Amazon and sell to everyone in the country, that could be another application for the exact same product.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had, and this is like largely speculation, so you can just choose not to answer this if you want, but I was just wondering, there are some other government projects that are potentially vulnerable with the change of administration, and I was just wondering if this particular grant is at all vulnerable to changes in funding for the USDA and things like that with the change of administration.
So this is funded by the Farm Bill, and I'd love for Carlotta and Jeff to speak to that. My personal opinion is this is not going to go away. People love farmers. People want farmers to be successful. But Carlotta and Jeff, what are your thoughts? If you can.
I just want to remain muted throughout this whole conversation. No, yeah, that would be my response to it. Is Farm Bill funded, and so we'll just have to kind of see where that goes. Of course, we think it's a great program, and would hope to see it continue in the same fashion. But we too are just going to see where things go at this point. We'll look for the announcement, kind of one thing at a time, and once that unrolls, we'll hit the ground running wherever that takes us. So.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Historically, the USDA funding is pretty bipartisan. I feel like I'm a know enough to say that confidently.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say that every Congress critter wants to stand up and say, I saved the family farm. I put money into the hands of the local farmer. I created farm jobs in rural communities. Who wants to go against that? I mean, I don't. I just, but we can't see the future, but for right now, it feels pretty secure to me. Other questions? Anybody want to ask a question about a project that you're considering and want to get feedback on whether it's a good idea?
Melissa, while we're waiting for somebody to maybe come up with something there, just one thing I was kind of thinking about too, with respect to how you put together an application. Of course, we want you to be successful in putting something together there, but think about it too, in terms of if you do get it, you want to make it, simpler to ask for reimbursement. So really one thing that comes to mind is like mileage. It's easy to keep a log and say, we went this many miles there and back to market on certain days. That's a great way to do it. Rather than say, turn in your gas receipts and then it comes back to saying, well, do you just use that vehicle? Is that gas all used specifically for the product? And that's just kind of a 30,000 foot view of it, but kind of think about that when you put it together. It'll make things easier, both on you and us, and easier for us to get you the money in a more expedient fashion. But I know Melissa's really good about that because you've been through all this and you'll coax people through that. But just kind of think about that. The more kind of intuitive it is and easier to kind of directly attribute to your project, just the easier it's going to be for you. And the clearer it is for when people are evaluating this. If it gets so convoluted and out there with things that you might be scratching your head, is this eligible? Is it ineligible? It's important when people are scoring these that they don't see a lot of murkiness in it. The clarity in an application is what helps them score better. I believe it certainly does for me because it makes sense to me.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jeff. That actually was great advice when you first gave that to me, because all of the keeping track of all of the gas receipts and the oil changes and doing a percentage of that was relevant to distribution versus personal use was a nightmare to navigate. Instead, take the federal mileage rate and calculate how many miles it is to and from the farmer's market, and that's what you get reimbursed for. So great.
Yeah, what happens is we get a gas receipt and they happen to get a corn dog and a Snickers bar or whatever. Then we got to kind of sort through those. Just small examples of things that'll make it smoother, for you down the road if you're lucky enough to get one of these grants. And we get a lot of grants. I don't know if I heard that piece of it mentioned. Washington State. And through the help of your support, and I think my colleagues are also very gifted in helping people through these. A lot of grants, don't ask me for statistics, but are awarded for Washington State, probably relative to the rest of the nation.
Yeah, Washington was number 4 in the nation last year for value-added producer grant money. So out of all 50 states and territories, we had more than the majority of the states, because it's a national competition where you're not just competing against other people in Washington, you're competing against everyone who applies in the entire nation, and they score all the applications and start funding with the highest scorers and just continue on down the list based on scoring until they run out of money. So the stronger your application is, the simpler the application is. It makes it so much easier for them to score them well. And I would say the other thing on there is read their criteria really carefully. USDA spends a lot of time and energy putting together examples. Their examples are perfect. If their examples are relevant to you, change it from organic carrots to chickens and use the exact same wording they had in the example, right? Because the reviewers are the ones who came up with that, and you want to make sure you address every question that they ask, even if you've asked it before. So one thing I have had people say is, but yeah, I already said that back 3 pages ago. Doesn't matter. You're going to say it again because they're asking for you for that information again on this page. So answer every question, answer it in the wording that they want to use, and use their examples if you can.
And sign everywhere. The portal may help us in that fashion because it may be, you know, when it's just a paper copy, it's easy to kind of skip around and do things. But we're hoping that the portal will make sure you've checked all the boxes and don't get kicked out on some technicality or don't get points or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the portal could be a really great resource. I'm excited to see what it looks like. So I want to thank all of our sponsors. Looking at the screen now, NABC is funded by different grants, as well as community partners who help us put on programs like this. You know, please fill out that evaluation form. That will help make sure that we continue to be able to have funders and partners who help us do these educational programs for you. Any last questions or thoughts before we call it a day?
Would either of you guys or any of you three be available to just like brainstorm project ideas and kind of think about the, you know, like the order of things and all that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you can reach out directly to Rural Development. You can go to Melissa or do both. So we're pretty hands-on as far as talking and assisting people by phone, Zoom, email.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have
Yeah.
a follow-up question. Melissa, I've taken a couple of years off from looking at this grant, but you're employed by NABC now, or are you still independent contracting as a advisor?
I'm still an independent contractor, but I primarily work with NABC, and NABC is funding this this webinar.
And what is the fee if we wanted your help writing our application? Is that still a thing?
It is, we'd need to have an offline conversation about that and kind of evaluate where your application is and what your goals are, and could talk about that.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, yeah. I did want to say that our Washington State Rural Development Office is absolutely fantastic. They are there to help you. They are your advocates. They're your resources. All of our rural development agents are absolutely fabulous at helping with the information. I would encourage you, if you want to apply this year, to get an application put together and not submit it early, but share that with your rural development officer well in advance of the application deadline to get feedback. If you give it to Carlotta a month before the deadline, I'm going to guess she's going to be able to give you great feedback and let you know if you're on the right track. If you give it to her the week it's due, you know, it just wouldn't be respectful of her time and resources. So I hope that's okay, Carlotta. Did I speak out of turn there? That, yeah.
And just remember, the new portal is going to be new to all of us, but I'm actually looking forward to it. I think the most difficult part will be the applicants getting in through all the steps that you have to take to have the authorization to get in there and do your thing. But I think hopefully if it works like it's supposed to, it's going to, like Jeff said, keep you from missing vital information for scoring and eligibility. And I think it's going to be a working document that we could take a look at for that pre-look, like Melissa mentioned. So that's my 2 cents, but we'll see when it comes into, when it gets live. That'll be great to see.
Yeah, and with that portal, it's going to be really important that when you register in that portal, you're doing it in the name of the applicant, the correct applicant. Whoever is filing their taxes that is the name. I've run into a couple problems with people who are like, well, yeah, but we market under this brand, but the tax money flows through to this entity over here. I'm like, okay, that entity that's receiving or that's filing the tax return, that's the entity you want to use. If it's a sole proprietor, that is your name. You want everything to match with what the IRS has on file for that farm. So be
And
really,
your SAM registration. That
yeah.
SAM registration, the applicant name has to match with that.
Yeah, because we've run into problems with that a couple times where people have slightly different names or addresses or entity names, or one farmer, you know, when they used the word "we," they could mean something entirely different than the legal entity. So have to be really careful with that. Eric asks, can a quality in the field improvement to an existing apple to a high value fresh produce be value added? I would say if you're talking about doing something in the field, that's production, right? You're changing some production method, you're changing something in the field. That's not an eligible activity. Eric, do you want to speak to that to the group?
Sure. We have an apple that gets an average price as a average apple, but when it's brought up to super high value, it becomes the most expensive apple in the world. And that's proven already by people who kind of grow. It's an apple we developed, and they are selling it for ridiculous prices. And but it takes 12 extra organic sprays. It takes a lot of extra sorting and packing, which I know would be value added, but a lot of the expenses is field changes in the field, wrapping each apple on the tree to prevent sunburn and blemish, things like that. The field work is the expensive part of making it a more value added product.
Yeah, those are all pre-harvest though, right? So you got to draw that line in the sand, and that apple has to be off the tree before this funding takes effect. So do that enhanced production method, apply under an enhanced production method grant, but ask for the money for the washing, packing, marketing. You know, go create an Instagram account and pay somebody to be your social media manager to promote these incredibly special apples, and make everybody have to have one. But the money has to be spent on post-harvest activities.
Got it. Thank you.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up for the day. Thank you so much, Carlotta and Jeff, for sticking with this through the whole thing. It was very valuable to have you around and have your insight. Please fill out those evaluation forms. Emily's going to be sending out some materials to each of you who've registered for this. This will be available, recorded online and available. And if you need any help or any questions, NABC is a resource here for you. I encourage you to contact me or contact the office and do a client intake and see how we can help you apply for this grant program or other ones. Be on the lookout for that business plan creation course coming up this winter following the end of this value-added producer grant cycle for those who are interested in applying for 2026 and beyond. So thank you, Carlotta and Jeff, for being here. Thank you, Emily, for your help. Thank you for